Hello there, Richard from BudgetKeyboardist.com. So my new album, False Alarm, is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon Music, basically everywhere in the world. And with the exception of one background vocal that I did, every vocal on the new album was made using Synthesizer V Pro Studio, both versions 1 and 2. And I used it as a plugin in Logic Pro. Right, so I'm not going to cover how to use this software because that's been done elsewhere, and I'm going to speak generally and assume that you know the basics of using the software. This is not a tutorial. This video just covers like 10 things that I learned using SynthV on my album. Let's get started. 1. One of the most common tweaks I had to make was smoothing out pitch jumps between words. Sometimes they worked well, and other times they just sounded weird. Now, versions 1 and 2 have different tools for redrawing the pitch line, but to me, both of them are straightforward. So, 2. The other big tweak is how words are pronounced. Trying to figure out how to make serious or every sound like 2 syllables. Serious, every, right? For example, figuring out how to do that. I'm not going to go into specifics, but anyway. Actually, if you're interested in how I tweaked certain words, let me know in the comments section. There doesn't seem to be any kind of a master list for SynthV users of the most commonly mispronounced words, and so in most cases, we make our own. 3. In a lot of cases, I use Soothe 2 to help with the vocals, and that worked well. I also used the LA2A UAD legacy plugin for compression. 4. Sibilance is a real issue with SynthV, especially Natalie and Natalie 2. In both cases, I usually play around by moving the S sounds around, making them shorter, making them softer in SynthV, and I found that to be more effective than using a de-esser. 5. Natalie and Solaria both tend to have some annoying frequencies that can kind of jump out of the mix. And I mentioned before that I use Soothe 2. That was really effective usually, but sometimes, like in the case of Natalie, it would cause the S's to distort a little bit. So sometimes, again, I found it more effective to go in and just tweak the actual S sounds in SynthV. Every once in a while, I would use the EQ in Logic and just kind of take one of those frequency ranges and pull it down a little bit. Basically, I just use my ears. 6. I tend to make 80s inspired music, so I really like to use reverb on vocals. And now specifically in Logic Pro, I like the Chromaverb vocal plate, which is under Halls, set somewhere between like 18 and 20%, which is kind of a lot of reverb. But again, the 80s, digital reverb had been invented in the 80s and it was all over the music. But of course, reverb is a personal choice. But if you're using SynthV, don't forget about the reverb. Give it a shot. Give it a listen. I think it's cool, but whatever. 7. If you're a longtime user of SynthV, you know this. Version 1 and 2 of the vocal databases definitely sound different. Solaria 1, for example, has a softer, more gentle, prettier, better vocal sound compared to Solaria 2 to my ears. I prefer Solaria 1. I didn't use any Solaria 2 on my new album. But when it came to like Natalie, I found I was quite happy using version 1 or version 2. And the same was true with Hayden. 8. If you are going to use version 2, I would seriously recommend that you download the script Progressive Vibrato, and you can get that on the Dreamtonics forum. I'm blanking on the username of the person who made it, but it is super useful because in version 2, they removed some elements of the vibrato control, which was stupid. And what this script does is it gives you some of that back again. It does a pretty decent job of giving you some of those features back. 9. So here are the voice databases that I own. Solaria, Saros, Natalie, Hayden, Liam, and Havoc. Now, I am a huge fan of Havoc, but he didn't really fit the tone of this new album. So he's going to be featured on the next one, which is I'm going to do a lot more guitar-based stuff. But by far, The easiest to use for me was Solaria. It wasn't even close. I didn't really need to tweak her tracks very much. Honestly, 85% of her tracks were just I played in the notes or I drew in the notes, I typed in the words. 85% of them I didn't have to touch. That's Solaria 1, by the way. In comparison, other singers required a lot more tweaking. But personally, I really found Solaria to be the most realistic out of the box. And honestly, she was my favorite sounding singer also. 10. Natalie and Liam come across as having some kind of like Slavic accent. And I'm not saying this is like a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. I'm just pointing it out. So what do I mean? I mean, Liam sometimes, instead of saying the, he'll say the, like almost like a D. Natalie, if she wanted her to sing wanted, she sings wonted, like wonted. They're both vocal databases from Dreamtonics. Now, I don't know what it is about their process, but to my ears, they definitely both have accents. Unlike Solaria, who doesn't have any accent, right? Eclipse Sounds, to my mind, makes the better voices, but anyway. But instead of trying to fix their accents, I prefer to kind of use them as they are. Because, I mean, that's the way it is with a real singer. You get them in front of the microphone, they are who they are. You know, if you don't want Natalie, use Solaria or somebody else. But I featured Natalie, Saros, and Solaria primarily on this album. Those are the three that sing all the lead vocals. Here's something else that I'll throw in for good measure. I absolutely loved working with Synthie for vocals. In the past, I've done all my own vocals, but once I hit about 58 years old, my voice was too fried to be able to sing the way I wanted to. With Synthie, I could work on vocals at 1 a.m. with headphones on without disturbing anyone. And changing lyrics after a vocal had already been recorded was super easy. Or changing notes. Unlike working with real vocals, where I'd have to set up the vocal booth again, and then it would never sound identical. Using Synthie for vocals is addictive. I wholeheartedly recommend using Synthie. But also, please understand, there's a learning curve. I am a web developer by day. I am good with computers. I'm also a programmer. There's no software that I can't learn. And I will tell you, with Synthie, sometimes there's a heck of a learning curve. There's also some words that vocal databases can't seem to sing correctly no matter what. For Solaria, it was the word drugs. I got as close as I could, but I still wasn't satisfied with how she sang drugs. No matter what I did, it wasn't perfect. On the other hand, I guess real singers can be that way too, right? And one more thing about Synthie. If you're going to get into vocal synthesizers, right? If you're going to delve into this and put them on tracks, do your homework. There's two different things that you can do, right? You can get software that you rent, which in the short run can be cheaper, but then you're basically subscribing and you're paying money forever. And, you know, I always hate that option. And then, like in the case of Synthesizer V Pro, you can buy it. And then that's what I always prefer. I always prefer to own my software rather than pay for it forever. But that aside, there's also the ethics of it. In the case of some of these programs, they train the voices on data that they don't have permission to use. And to me, I think that's horrible. I'm not okay with that. The folks at Dreamtonics who make Synthesizer V Pro have the best model in my opinion. So here's how it works. Like with Solaria, real life Solaria is a singer named Emma Rowley, okay? And Eclipse Sounds is the name of the company that does her vocal database. But whether it's Dreamtonics or Eclipse Sounds, it's both the same model. They both work this way. The singer does a whole lot of singing, hours and hours worth of singing. They take those isolated vocal tracks. They put it into their algorithm, run it through, tweak it, etc. They come up with a vocal database that we can use. Now, Emma Rowley got paid to do that vocal session, but Emma Rowley also got paid when I bought Solaria, when I bought the model. So she's getting a commission each time her vocal database is being sold. Look, if we're going to do this stuff ethically, that's That's the model we got to use. That's what we need to do. We need to value our talent, and we need to compensate them fairly. And in my research, Synthesizer V Dreamtonics had the best model for that. Again, do your own homework. There's new companies popping up all the time. Maybe there will be some companies that pay their vocal talent even more, or even better or whatever. It's a personal decision. But I would strongly recommend that when you're looking at the software, you consider whether you want to pay, like subscribe and pay forever, right? Or whether you want to own it, and then also the ethics of it. So Emma Rowley sings on my new album on probably more than half the songs. And when I bought her vocal database, she got paid for her voice. And every time they sell a copy of her vocal database, she's going to make money. And I that's important to me. I think that's really important. Look, I'm rambling now. You can tell when I'm not using a script. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And I will see you again next time.